Hello, I'm Mark Ford from the training team. What we're going to do today is a little video version of WIMET 423, which is the single phase meter exchange. Okay, do remember, once you've loaded your van up with the equipment you need for the rest of the day, check your paperwork, confirm your address, confirm the meter details, confirm the customer. All of those should be taken as part of the beginning of the job. At this stage we're moving on to the consumer unit. We're happy that all the meter installation is okay. Confirm with the consumer unit that that looks in a good condition. Ask the customer if there's a convenient socket outlet to use. Also give your intention of turning the power off to the customer. Once they've gone off to turn or check everything's okay within the house that you can do this work, you could then start to prepare on to our first stage of actually doing the meter exchange. PPE starts to become a very important part of this. Safety glasses, these are my own proper ones with a lens, gloves, art jacket, and the component parts you'd need to wear depending on what stage you're at, have to be ready to go. Check plug is going to be our first stage, so we take the check plug, so put the check plug in, turn on, and we have 3 lights, which is okay. Okay, so having established that the polarity was correct at the socket, we now need to move on to the meter installation to confirm the connections between the incoming supply point, the meter, and the tails going off to the customer. We can start at the base of the cutout. If you put the tester somewhere near the centre or centre at the front, move up to the top, to give you a good indication. Always come to the middle of the neutral block or the outside edge of it. Don't come to the middle because you'll get both indicating between, or at the top of the neutral block there. Across the meter, if we go to the outside edge, between the two, and then the outside edge and end. If we're happy at this stage that we're going to move forward to cutting the seals off, initially we did a visual inspection of this. As we're cutting off, we may find that seals have actually been twisted back on, so look out for that. Need to remove the seals from the cutout. We just cut this one seal off. Because I've got my cut gloves on, I can pull on that to take that out. Cut the seal. Necessary to cut the seal maybe in 2 places on some of the older ones, especially on small ones like this. If you've got a small piece of wire that gets left behind, use the cutters to pull it with. All the time I'm keeping the parts in my hand. Go for the bottom one. If I get that in the centre, I should get both parts off in one go. I'm now left with a cutout that is unsealed. I can put this in my waste pot out of the way, but I've not taken the seal off the terminal cover yet. We'll do that after proving dead at the cutout. Okay, we've now moved on to our full PPE scenario. Art jacket, rubber gloves, visor, safety glasses, and we're going to turn the customer's main switch off. At this point, it's important that you've confirmed with the customer that they're happy to have the power turned off. And if it's an elderly person, it may be necessary to make sure they're sat somewhere safe. Anybody that's saying they may be wanting to walk around the house while you're doing this job, make sure that all the passageways are clear and there's no obstructions for them to trip over. So, quick call out to the customer. I'm about to turn your power off. Put your visor down. Open the consumer unit, main switch is off. At this point, if you've left your check plug in, you can clearly see that it's actually gone off. Good indication that the main switch has functioned. Okay, so you understand where the PPE comes into the action. Gloves, cut gloves should be worn throughout once we start to actually work. Once you've got your cut gloves on, you've got a decision. Some people will have hands that they can't put the rubber gloves on with the cut gloves on, so you're going to have to take your cut gloves off, put the rubber glove on, then do the job within that part of the exchange. Take the rubber glove off, put the cut glove back on, and carry on. Others, if you've got the right rubber gloves, you may be able to put these on over the top of the cut gloves. Great advantage. Do you remember the cuffs on the jacket is designed with a Velcro piece? Turn the Velcro in so it makes the cuff smaller, and then you should be able to slide that on quite conveniently. What have I not done beforehand? Always go back to this. When the glove has come off, take the cuff, roll it, that will inflate the glove, and we can check that there's no penetration of any sharp objects into the glove. That should be done both before and after every time they're used. Okay, moving on from that, we then think about our jacket. With our jacket on, do remember to do the zip up and the collar, and using our visor, make sure that's adjusted. Do remember, with the visor down, the customer will not be able to hear you very clearly. Okay, so now that I'm wearing my full PPE, I'm ready to de-energise the cutout. I'll put my visor down and I'll go forward and we'll take the fuse out, take the neutral cover off, confirm the condition inside as this comes out. We'll then confirm with a multimeter what the voltage is, and we'll prove dead at the outgoing terminals. Having done that, we'll then move on to taking the terminal cover off the meter, so that seal will have to be removed, and we'll check across the terminals of the meter. Having proved they're dead, we can put the shroud into the cutout, and that will allow us to remove the relevant PPE. Having cut the seal wire, you don't want to be pulling the seals around with your rubber gloves, because you actually penetrate the rubber glove. Grip it with the cutters and pull it out. Makes life a lot easier. Having chosen the correct shroud for the type of cutout, a good method is to offer it slightly to the top, push down and in at the bus, and it will clip in. Now we've reached this point in the exchange, we can take our rubber gloves off and our visor off to continue with the practical side of it. Earlier on we were talking about what the customer's doing, had gone away to get themselves sorted, turn things off. If you've taken advantage of that time, you may well have already prepped up your meter, so the screws are run out, the screws for fixing it are ready to go. All this saves time. Now that the cutout has been proven dead and the shroud has been fitted, we can proceed to mark our tails. Positive identification. On the incoming we can put an L, an N. Working across the meter, we'll have an L, hey, always good, an N, and an L, and then that's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. With this installation, we only actually have a 60 amp supply coming in, although it's a 100 amp carriage. The meter originally was rated at 2080s, but the customer also only got a 60 amp fuse board there, although it's of a modern type. As was said earlier, that we have prepared the meter, recheck that the cables will be able to enter the ports by making sure the screws will run out, take your fixing screw and reconfirm that that's going to be the right size, it's not penetrating through too far. With this installation, we're not going to replace the meter tails this time. We do have to consider what will happen to them when we lift the meter off. Tails on our side we can adjust because we can check they're tight in the cutout when we've finished the work. We'll be able to remove from here, okay. On the customer's side we have to consider the length of tail. Do we need to fit a cleat, or are we going to be able to lift the meter away from the tail successfully? There's no preferred order to slacking the screws off on a meter. You just have to consider if you loosen both screws off, the cable may drop out. I prefer to run all the way along the bottom, about 2.5 turns per screw. That should allow the copper to be removed from the meter. We'll just work our way around here. Just check to see that each one is loose, but don't pull it hard. As you saw, that one wanted to drop out. If we leave the customer's tails like that, we're not pulling them, we're not going to put any strain on the consumer. Now take the fixing screws out of the meter. Some of you may have magnetic screwdrivers, so the screw will come out. If it's of a slotted type, you may have to catch it as it falls. Once the screws are out, put your tools down, gently lift up and check that the cables come free. Having checked our meter tails are in good condition and we're happy that they'll go back into the new meter, we can drop the new meter onto our tails and give it an idea of its position. Take a fixing screw, offer it in. If you give it a little push and start the screw off, don't necessarily screw it all the way home. Take your second screw, offer it into the port, align the meter so it's fairly square. Again, another push, one in, and then tighten the second one down. We're happy that it's firm. We can then move on to putting our tails in fully. Make sure there's no copper showing, good look underneath. If you check on the top screw first, if you notice that the cable's trying to be pushed down, it'll indicate that it's too short. And then bring on to the second screw. Again, pushing the second tail up, that's tail number 2. Top screw, happy with that. And gently with the customers. Now because this one's lying in front of the neutral, we'll do that one first. And again, and check, I didn't feel the cable being pushed down. And off the last one up. And for finishing off, if we work our way around the meter, we can check that each one is down tight. Okay. When finishing off the screws, for those that have got quite strong wrists, standard screwdriver use might be okay. If you've got less wrist strength, you might find it easier to put the screwdriver on. Having got that first contact, open your hand, grip with your wrist and lift your elbow, and that will finish the screw off. At this stage we want to check the cutout. We're looking at the condition of the braids. If there are springs, we need to check to see they're in good condition. We're going to open the cutout up itself. We need to do this so that we can confirm there's actually a fuse in here. Sometimes if the fuse has blown, customers will open these up and they'll put a piece of wire in. The fuse may not be of the right type. So if we drop this out, now we established earlier that this was a 60 amp cutout, it's a 60 amp fuse. That goes with the 16mm tails that this customer's currently got. And as we're not upgrading anything, that's okay. So no foreign bodies, correct size fuse. Tighten the screws back up. When tightening the screws back up, it's really important to check that the spring sits level. So we're looking to see that the spring is in the right place. Just finish those two off. Put the cover back on. It's possible to actually adjust the springs if you do this slightly. You can just give it a gentle tweak. This is only about a 1/16 of a turn. It's not a massive amount, but that will just extend that spring up. Bearing in mind that that's been compressed for the last 20 odd years. So we've now got our meter all fitted and ready to go. Our cutout is ready to be inspected. We've moved on to our rubber gloves. Our arc jacket is zipped back up. Our face visor is fitted. We've checked our gloves before we put them back on. We can now progress to remove the shroud where necessary, or to check all the screws are tight in the cutout before we put the fuse carriage back in. Do remember to use the right size screwdriver. There's no point using that, you'll damage it. Use the correct screwdriver. So on the live terminals we can check the live outgoing side of the cutout. On the neutral we can check the outgoing neutrals right the way around the block. If there's earth terminals we would check those. Come down, if there's an earth block, check the earth block is tight. Okay, that's all been checked, we're happy. If we did find a defect, say when we went onto the neutral we found it excessively loose, we'd have to fill out a default form, pass that on through the ESC. At this point we can remove the shroud. We need to replace the neutral cover. Now it may be necessary to remove a shroud to replace a neutral cover. We have some cutouts with secondary covers. This one we can just pop this neutral cover back on. You may find it an advantage to use a small pair of pliers sometimes, depending on the type of screw. Because this one's only a nice fine thread, we can fit that okay. Having got that into place, we can now inform the customers the power is about to be returned. Depending on your situation, is the cutout a long way from the customer? Did we inform them earlier? If this is in one property, we would actually call out to the customer, allowing them to know that the power's about to come back on, and then we'll turn the consumer unit. So, fuse going back in, nice clean action, offer it up, make sure you're happy, push and push home. Okay, we can now move on to the consumer unit. We turned this off earlier, clean action onto the consumer unit, back to our socket, happens to be underneath, so we turn that on and we're happy. We've got 3 lights back and showing. Once we're ready to seal up, you put a top seal on, you put the wire through, bring it over the top and pass it through again. You'll form a figure of 8. A small bend in the short end of the wire at the front, and then pull the wire tight will leave you with 2 points to put the seal onto. Drop the seal over the first wire, down on the second, push it home. If you spread the 2 wires out, that'll hold it still. Do you remember when you put the seal in, it's got to go to the right place on the sealing pliers. Open the plier up, offer it on all the way to the back, give the little tug, and then we've got a nice tight seal. The other thing to check on this is that we can clearly see the indentation. These pliers, the last 3 numbers are 83A, and I can clearly see 83A on the sealing tank. Having put the fuse back in, we can reconfirm that our connections are correct through the meter, and then we'll move on to the fuse board. We'll just use this as an example. Obviously the other seals would normally have been put on, but once you've reached this stage, do remember when you're cutting these wires, hold on to the spare pieces, they will fly otherwise. Different terminal covers will have different fixing screws. Most common now is the centre screw. One of the things a lot of guys struggle with is when the sealing wire is to be pushed up, it stops, it won't rise. So we just gently push it up in, lift the wire a little bit, and then it will poke, and you can see we get a little kink in it, and that will allow it to come through. Bend the wire over, take your seal. Again, remember, hold on to the 2 halves. Once the wire's up, we can bring that up to here. And we don't actually want to pull that hard up into that space, because that recess will leave the flag sticking out, which could be caught. So if we position the seal at just below the terminal cover, again making sure our pliers are opened or in the right place. 1 click will hold on to the seal, level that up, squeeze, and we get our nice seal. Again, holding on to the 2 wires, clean cut off. We've now finished our installation. One of the important things to leave behind is the meter exchange sticker. We filled this out earlier. Current reading on here, 29366, that's been entered, meter number. Polarities and tails were checked, signature, and it's a 5-dial meter. With these you have to consider whether you're inside or outside. If it's a back meter board or it's a meter box, you may need to stick this onto the side of the fiberglass of the meter box. If you've got inside and it's in poor condition, you need to find the next best place to stick it. If the customer's happy, quite a good place to stick it is actually on the cover for the fuse board. That can go there. It's adjacent to where the meter reader is going to see it as he comes in. It's not in the customer's way. If it's stuck on the board, it could peel off and we can lose those. The meter reader does need this for when he calls, because it will help him put the information in, indicating the meter exchange and the current readings. We also need these for records, if for whatever reason we need to backtrack on this meter exchange. Okay, the meter's all finished. Meter's functioning, customer's back on, and we now need to clear our floor area. Do remember, take all your waste with you. You mustn't leave wires, offcuts, these, and cavities are not a place to drop all your waste. They will be found later on when you have an audit done on you.